So yesterday we finished the first part of what I planned it out to be 3-part presentation, hoping to dwell more on the third part, but going to the first two, to link it to the third part. But let's see how how this happens. And but there's no hurry, particularly here. Before we move on to just like me, I want to recapitulate what we have gone through in terms of the spirit of determination to free oneself from the dictates, from the shackles, from the bondage of afflictions. And that determination will happen, a strong determination. The strength of the determination will depend on how much of an awareness and understanding, conviction one has arrived at in holding the negative emotions, negative outlook, as well as their root misperceptions that will be spelling out one after the other, to be responsible for the sufferings that we bring upon ourselves, and then also inflict others. So that's very essential. First and foremost, one has to work on really figuring out where the crux lies, where the source lies of our sufferings. One thing to be reminded is that suffering is a feeling, is an experience. It's a conscious experience, feeling. We do that on the physical level, but more so we do that in a much more impacting way at our mental level. So for that to happen, it's not just merely automatic, that it will happen when surrounding things change the way they do, either to our liking or not, but how we connect with them is how then we get affected by it. And unless and until we take charge of our own way of connecting, if we let the default mode, particularly given our condition of being so habituated in negative way of thinking, so much so that the first thing that we think of something would be something negative, whereas there could be so many avenues of thinking of it in positive ways, whatnot. But when we see ourselves reacting the way we do, it's clear indication that yes, so much of a negative baggage has been collected within us, and thus not living it to the default mode, to our own usual reactive mode, rather assert our freedom in choosing how we want to connect, if we want to connect. And so that kind of awareness has to be arisen within us. Unlike pointing finger at others, like, oh, this is what caused me. The other day I was speaking with another Geshe, and I saw him going through some difficult problem, and it even showed on his face, in his mood, like I have done to others also. So at that time it was not the right time to say, oh, you have the control. I could have done that, but that could have what do you call backfired, and that could have turned him off. But then I waited for the right time, and he was relieved from that. And then we had a discussion, and he said, "Oh wow, you may have seen." He said, "You may have seen this on my face. I was really, really depressed because things not working the way he wanted, and so many other conditions were really kind of almost railing against that person, like not trying to understand, etc." And he said, "Did you see that on my face?" And he was pointing his finger, saying, "He really brought me to that." I said, "Now things were solved," but he was recalling it and then sharing it. I said, "No, he didn't do it. You let it happen. You let it happen. I mean, he was the condition, but you let it happen. You received it the way you did, and then you suffered. He said, you are really right. And then we had a deep discussion. I mean, we are fortunate that we have studied the Dharma and have kind of really developed a conviction and a sense of confidence that yes, all the sources, all the answers are definitely there, except we have difficulty in really connecting with them and understanding them. But we kind of theoretically know them there, and we are fortunate enough to kind of have the confidence built up to now that that's where we should look. And when we look at that, we find those, and we really had very lively discussion. I mean, right there, the mood changed into kind of being taking it into very light, into some kind of a real substantial. And then he even shared one thing to me. And he said, "You are really right." And I knew this from before, except that time I was not in the presence, in my present mind. And he shared this this teaching from Dulwa Lung, from a Vinaya text, where there is a archer, right? There's an expert archer, and then there was an expert archer, and then there was a great swordsman. And between the two, they were so equally expert that no one could hurt each other, except the archer was trying to hurt, but the swordsman was so expert. Every time he would just cut it like this. And then the archer was really hard pressed in figuring out how to get him. He's so good. And then he planned out a way to distract him by having some very attractive, beautiful image out there in the direction he would see him. And he got he got him distracted in the meantime. And then he could hurt him. And then the swordsman would ask, "I really got you." He said, the swordsman was in his present mind saying, "No, you didn't got me. You didn't get me. My distraction got me. My lack of mindfulness and my lack of introspection got me." By the way, these days we speak a lot about mindfulness, how it is good, whatnot. And of course, the mindfulness practice that is being talked about is mainly geared at being mindful to the present moment and guarding your mind like that, but doesn't as much spell out the need of really tying the mindfulness with positive way of thinking, negative way of thinking. Mainly people think of just be mindful, just know what it is, and of course that will do a great job. But in a classically Buddhist perspective, that is the basis. That's not all the story. Now, being mindful, now you be mindful of whether some negative emotions, negative perspectives have a reason or not. And if so, what would be the antidote to that? So, kind of being mindful, not just in terms of what one is going through, but at the same time, looking specifically in terms of whether a negative thought, negative perspective has a reason or not, or a positive thought has a reason or not. In that regard, the teaching in the sutras where it speaks of four efforts. I think that's how it is translated. 4 efforts. Yeah, usually the term, it is among the 37 qualities, right? Usually they call 4 efforts, but it is Yangda Pongwashi. Yangda Pongwashi means 4 perfect abandonings. Yeah, it makes sense, because if it is purely translated abandoning, that would only cover part of the story, not the whole. Because of the 4 efforts, 2 aligns into abandoning, 2 aligns into adopting. So the four strivings. So four strivings, which means you look, you be mindful at your mindset. Yes, if negative thoughts have arisen, then your effort at that time, by being mindful, would be to mitigate it, to abandon it. And if it has not arisen, make effort not to make it to kind of stabilize the non-arising there. Kind of make sure that you seal it even further. And when you look and you have good thought, promote it even further. If it has, when you look and you happen to what do you call, see it not being there, then you make effort to generate it. So that's what a more fuller story of mindfulness would be. So that's the reason. That's exactly what he was saying. No, you didn't get me. My distraction got me. My lack of mindfulness got me. That I let in distraction, attachment. Particularly, it was attachment, clinging attachment that was getting his attention to that attractive thing, and that's how he let that what do you call gap in between. So he shared that with me, Geshe, and we're going to have a good discussion, and which is not to say that we should be condoning others' wrong actions. We should be able to take action, take measures in combating them, but we should be very mindful in knowing where this is coming, and who is to blame or what is to blame. More than anything else. So very often when we say we should be compassionate towards the victim itself, people tend to then think that, oh, we are condoning the action. Because that wouldn't be a smart, that would even be a case of smart, wise compassion even. For compassion to be fully wise, in such situation, one should be even more instigated, more inspired to take action, but out of compassion, knowing that the person is under the siege of his or her anger, rage, which has clouded his or her perspective, didn't even know what would be good for himself or herself, that then and after, let alone what would be good for others. So, yeah. So this determination has to be grounded. Before we move on to extending our compassion to others, first we have to have worked our ground strongly. First by really looking clearly where the fault lies, where we need to work. And then developing a sense of caution against the ravages of these negativities in us. And from that, at the very least, irrespective of whether one is capable or how much capable or not, one should be determined that that is something to be avoided to the extent possible, and one should be warning against the ravages, the tricks, the do you say the sly tricks? Yeah, sly fox. I see. Yes. That these afflictions could turn out to be. So warn against them. And then based on that, this is not the whole story. Just determining that, say, this is the fault. I identified. Now I'm not going to do anything against it. Then it won't happen, right? Now one has to make effort. One has to make effort in avoiding that sly fox. Depending on how strong you feel towards that, against that fox. If you're strong, you face it. If not, avoid it. Run away. Run away. So that in the meantime, you could take time in building your strength. Come back, face it. Anyhow, you have to face it. This fox is not external fox, internal fox. It's always with you, right? So, yeah, jackal. Yes, yes, okay. Yeah, it's a jackal. In some cases, hyenas. They are meanness personified. Ooh, particularly when they corner a big bull or a yak or whatnot. They're insistent on it. They're really focused, right? So, yeah, so one has to build one's strength. So very often, any troubling emotions we have, if you feel like you're weak against it, then although we say meditate on breathing, what it means is think of something else. Think of something else, right? Think of something else, freshen up, look at it clearly. You will get a better perspective, clearer perspective, rather than be clouded by the worry, fear, anger, jealousy towards this that problem, on top of feeling weak in his face. Kind of avoid it. So avoid it. Keep the mind away from it. By how? By using the toy. By holding the toy of breath. And tell the mind, look, what I have in my hand. This is a wonderful toy. Look at it. And let the mind kind of oh, yeah, yes, like that, right? So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be confined to breathing. It could be anything. Think of something else. Anything that comes handy. It doesn't need to be what you call routine and structured and kind of discipline. Like, oh, it has got to be just breath and nothing else. No. It could be anything. Except breath, you would have it there, right then and there. And then, yeah, among other things, breath is something. How many of you are too attached and attracted, too attached to breathing? or the other way around, too repulsed and too really disgusted with breathing? So there are some qualities about breathing that it doesn't kind of drag you or doesn't repulse you. So it's a perfect point to kind of be distracted. Yet at the same time, it is so amazing the way it happens, and it is so important. It's so important, so much so that our life hinges on it. You know how we started our life? By breathing in or out? By breathing in or out? In or out? How would you imagine? I don't think we breathe. Okay, I will leave it open. I have some other stories to tell, but I will leave it open. We have to look into up-to-date science material document and then see what it says. Yeah, we could have a debate about that also. Well, in one of the scriptures, I saw this. Now, I'm not leaving it to another time, okay? I'm just sharing it here. In one of the scriptures, particularly in Abhidhamma, it teaches 6 ways of meditating on breath. 6 ways, not just one. Out of which, the last 2, meditation has nothing to do with breath. But then there is a reason why it is connected to breathing. It is so telling about where the meditation on breathing stands vis-a-vis others. What is it supposed to lead to? Is it the whole story or not? Should we just spend our whole life chasing breath? Breath is with us. We can't chase, right? Either we can't run before it or after it. We can just. So, anyway, that collection is called 6 Ways of Breathing Meditation. Except the first 4 has actually to do with breathing, whereas the other 2 is kind of leaping off from there to then more important topics. Anyway, in there, it touches on this topic of how we do the meditation on breathing, and it also cares to touch on how we breathe in and out, to connect us to the fact that our whole life story is captured in there. We start our life, and we stop breathing in. That's the end of our story. That's it. So that's at least what the scripture says. At least in terms of the later part, we breathe out and fail to breathe in. That's how we might die. We may agree, right? I guess so. But now we have seen a disagreement as to how we begin, right? So I leave it there. But the scripture says like that. So it even makes a point about breathing in first and breathing out, on top of all the other ways of doing the meditation, in mentioning that this is exactly how we start our life and end our life, and to connect with us to this reality of life. Because very often, many of the problems, including our clingings, obsession, is because we either don't think of that reality or completely try to kind of deny that. And because of that, we unnecessarily bring so many of pent-up problems within us. Okay, so that's first one, to run away. To run away from the sly fox, or sly jackal. Yeah, sly hyena. And then come back. Not keep on going there and avoid the problem. You wouldn't have solved the problem, right? Then come back. The problem would be there. But you don't necessarily drag oneself into those mental problems as it did. And come afresh and then look at it. And be reminded that the connection, how you feel, is depending on whether you provide the connection or not. If so, in what ways you connect. Now the other way of dealing with it in a slightly more practical way is, having now created this space to look afresh, then deal with the situation. If it is still so strong to kind of just automatically develop or make you justify your anger, hatred, ill will, worry, etc., then face it. Face it in the sense of kind of look in the face of anger. Instead of becoming the anger one lumped together with you, becoming it and suffering, say, let me look at you, pull it out, look at it in the face, and then have debate with it, reason out. Very often it will fail, because it is backed up, it is fueled by wrong reasonings. Yeah, let me say, very often for now. At least leave some room, some understanding to maybe our suspicion or misgiving. But very often it would have very unsustainable reasonings. But at the very least, what it does is, if we become mindful and look at our anger, jealousy, greed, at least it creates that space between oneself and the anger. Now it is not one thing. Now it is separate. Right then and there, one will find a space to kind of a, as you say, kind of a leg room, a wiggle room. Yes, wiggle room. Yes, and then, if possible, reason out. with it. Ah, either it will be too short-sighted, too narcissistic, too short-sighted, too narcissistic, uh, too self-obsessed, uh, too disrespectful of others, too lack of understanding, etc., etc. That would be fueling it. And then the reasonings, it would come. It would say, that person hurt me. That person said something against me. Well, why did you jump into being angry? Let's check if the blame has some truth in it. Very often, many of the blames would have truth, or at the very least, you can see how that is coming from, and be able to relate to that. Besides, that's not everything. That's not the whole story of yourself. There's so many other good qualities. If somebody is hurting you, there are others who are loving you at the cost of their life. So likewise, you bring up all of those things and see how to break through the narrow way of thinking, narrowness of the thought, etc., etc. So we can spend the whole day on this. So that's one way to kind of come back to the mental state and then see what it is up to, get to know it. And then in the case of anger, etc., kind of reason up, kind of look at its face and then see, particularly it would say, that hurt me. And the image of I at that point would be something that very palpable. And then say your question, who is this I that is being hurt? And look for oneself. One would be at sea and not finding it. As much as you thought that I am here, but the moment you begin to look into any aspect of our psychophysical composition, you won't be able to identify anything with I. So is the case with everything. Part of the story about this is because, to a great extent, I'm saying to a great extent, don't take me too literally, okay? I would be rather pushing for more degrees. I would say totally, but outwardly, I was just saying most of the case, right? Anyway, but yeah. So anyway, in most of the cases, it's because of our our projection of who we are, right? Our projection of who we are to the extent of seeing ourselves, or the hurt, or the person who is hurting one, in the light of being almost solid, concrete, objectified form. So when we just playfully ask who this is that's being so much hurt, or who is this is being so much concerned about, etc. And likewise, look at the person whom you may at that point see him or her as a complete lump of negativity, but then ask if that's the whole story, if that person has other qualities. Try to think of other occasions of relating, or dealing with that person, and then see how he had other aspects, even to one's own experience. So likewise, etc., etc. So that way, you kind of come in challenging the negativity in a slightly more upfront way. And then another more strong way of dealing with that is, if you find that that's what you tend to be drawn into in relation to that person, without reason sometimes with reason, you think that you are justified, but nonetheless you are made to feel horrible, then challenge yourself in really coming up to develop the opposite positive attitude towards that person. See if you can find room to develop that opposite positive thoughts toward that person. We call this, Dongnen Dopa. We call this facing up, kind of confronting it with its corresponding opposite positivity. You may agree or may not agree. Sometimes you say, "Oh, that person deserves nothing but hurt, nothing but anger." Particularly when we begin to see the value of love and compassion for our own good, for the good of others, whatnot, then you will begin to, or we will begin to value difficult people and difficult situations even more. Like they are now turning out to be a rare phenomena. Rare, hard-earned, and precious. Oh, they really push the button. Show us where our weak points are. If you're just surrounded by good people, always saying, "Oh, you're good, you're good, you're good," you don't ever get to see the area you need to work on. And they really, most of the case, they are really right at the spot. They can point you right at the spot. Say, this, at the very first go. And that too, they do that at their own cost, without having to be asked. Completely free of cost. Wow. That is really rare. Whereas if one could arise to that occasion and really kind of then work on it. Because after all, we all want happiness. We all want suffering to end. We all want to better ourselves. And the way to better ourselves is by finding what is stopping us from doing so. We have difficulty finding that. Like we can see others' faults, but we have difficulty seeing our own fault. We have a saying in Tibetan, you'll be able to even see a louse on the face of someone, but not a yak on your face. A big yak on your face, even then you cannot see it. But if you see a small louse on somebody's face, from distance you can point out, yeah, there. This may be exaggeration. Just imagine, let's meditate. Imagine a yak standing on your nose. Ooh. And then we are so easily irritated by people finding fault with us. Whereas deep down we want to be better. And most of the cases they are really right in pointing out our faults. But something, when we hear our faults being pointed out, we are really irritated, humiliated, agitated. And didn't sound like music to us. We have to really recheck that. From now onward, if somebody is criticizing you, that should be music. That should really rock us. You're bad, you're this. Oh, yes. You should be nodding and saying, yes. Okay, in some cases you say, okay, I don't see it, no. So anyway, these are ways of thinking, not in the face of problem, but on other occasions when one has leisure time on oneself, think through them and then kind of develop a sense of conviction into that and then bring them over in our workplace, in our daily life to kind of really test them out. And then that's one step, right? So these are ways to kind of strengthen ourselves. When we begin to not only see where the sources of problems lie, and also have identified them and then develop a determination to kind of work against them, but also through our own efforts, through our own practices, have seen the possibility of its doability, its effectiveness or whatnot, then it will eventually strengthen our sense of care, concern, informed with the possibility of know-how, informed with the know-how of how to bring that about, to share with others. And that's how then we can move from there to just like me, they are, this is the way out, or these are possible ways out that I can help out, that's what is happening. And we'll be able to place the problems, the blames, whatever, the hurts, etc., in their proper places where they belong, and not exaggerate on them or unnecessarily deny them, but rather be able to deal with them matter of factly. So we talked about running away from the sly jackal, sly hyena, sly fox, and then kind of separating it, kind of trying to get a closer look at the emotions. That kind of look at them in the sense of be mindful and then look at them. Oh, it will be amazing! It will be a great spectacle. How sly they are, how deceptive they are, how creepy they are. In so many different forms they will come. Or saying, I love you, I'm doing this just for you. Yeah, it can come in so many, what do you call, disguises, masquerading as this good guy, this good guy, this good guy. Whereas all it does is hurt you, and hurt you in a core way, harden you in your negativity. And in many cases, our imagination, we're using our great potential of imagination, conceptualization, planning forward. We're misusing it. We have a small problem, we'll be sitting on it, or even sleeping on it. You call it, right? Sleep on it, sleeping on it, sitting on it. And then really blowing it up into so many things happening, which have not even started. What this happens, and then this happens. So we would play it out in our mind like real, and it get really worked up so much so that now the breathing has changed, blood pressure has raised, right? I mean, you begin to even appear differently. Whereas, who knows? Things could happen or may not happen that way. So that's the reason why I was emphasizing dealing with the situations matter-of-factly, not denying that things could go wrong. Definitely things could go wrong, but deal with them for what they are. We already have an expression in place. It is what it is, right? I mean, we have to be really employing that, exercising that in our daily life. And then bring in deeper philosophical understanding. That guy is so bugging, so troublesome, so whatnot. It's a fleeting thing. It'll be gone one day. So would I be. Be relieved. Why be so obsessed? It's just a temporary thing. It'll be gone. I'll be gone. It'll be gone. Even if it doesn't go, it has to naturally change. Things have changed from good to bad to good to bad. It's part of the nature. You also play your role in making, in even changing it further. Be that in how you relate to them, how you react to them, and also in actual life situation of how you meddle with it. And then, but do so consciously, with full sense of awareness of what you're going through, what you're letting yourself go through. In short, put yourself in the driving seat. Don't let this wild, spoiled, mad mind in the driving seat. Usually what we do in the scriptures also it mentioned, and it is very true. We let anger, it's almost like when we are walking, it's like 3 poor persons, we are 3 poor persons walking in a parade. We are at the end. Our anger, jealousy, greed is leading us. And following that is our mind saying, oh yes, following the dictates of the anger, jealousy. And then after that you are walking. It's like, now we have to change that. You say, no, anger, you just go away from here. Mind, okay, I can get rid of you, but you come after me. Let me lead you. And then lead it. So that's what it meant. Put oneself in the driving seat, not the mind. Until the mind has become totally, perfectly enlightened, awakened, then you can completely rely on the mind. Okay, that's it. So bringing in understandings. I just briefly mentioned bringing in the reality of change, how change is part and parcel of the reality, and that there's nothing wrong or nothing we can do about it, except we can be a healthy player in it, in making the change happen the way you would want and the way you would be able to kind of relate to in a more healthy way. Yet at the same time, kind of be accepting, make peace. Yes, that is a very strong word. Make peace with the reality, rather than go against it, rather than be unnecessarily in a tension, which would be a what do you call a losing battle. Yes. We usually volunteer to what do you call run against the reality, and always turn out to be the loser. Why not? There is an expression even in English. What is that? If you can't defeat, join the. Pardon? Yeah. If you can't beat them, join them. Be part of the winner. Yeah, now you're winner. Not quite that dramatic, but yeah, in one's mental way of thinking, a mental way of relating to things, we would have always the option to do that. And for our own good. Okay, so I mean that should suffice here at this point. It is already 1 hour. Yeah, so that's what I meant. We have to we can't just move right away from there. Have to really know how to work, how to build one's strength, and kind of grow in one's effectiveness, in one's capacity, in one's awareness, and then kind of let that be the ground from where then you could, if one cares, then grow in caring for others. And first and foremost is to see how they are similar. Even today, scientific researchers are backing this idea of perception of similarity. How they say that if we relate to each other from a place of perceiving similarity, not focusing on dissimilarity, but similarity, no matter how fleeting, how trivial that may be. Like, somebody is wearing the same jersey of my football team, of which I'm a fan. I'm reminded of a story. My nephew, he happens to ride motorbike, and eventually he even joined a local motorbike band that they would go occasionally out. So one day he was out on his bike, and he had just stopped it outside a gas station somewhere that he went into gas. And on the way out, he saw someone standing by his bike, and he was laughing and smiling. He said, and he wondered what might be the case. He said, you have the same bike as me. They made friends right there. same bike. Similarity of bike, which could be a fleeting thing, could be here and gone tomorrow. But the very fact that they were thinking of the similarity triggers that sense of bond, connection. But we are similar, all of us, without exception, in a much, much stronger way. A way that we cannot ever be away from. All want happiness, do not want suffering. Irrespective of what their actions, behaviors may be, how wild and a far cry they may look from that kind of aspiration. But nonetheless, everyone wants happiness, do not want suffering. Even the story that I spoke of yesterday, where my auditing time in University of Tennessee, when they told about such person who seemed to be bent on harming themselves, that was their perception of how happiness would be, at least a relief from whatever they may be going through. That's how I interpreted it. It's still wanting happiness, except not knowing what happiness would look like. For some, right, taking very desperate, harmful action would be the only, at least in their eyes, the only relief, only happiness, only relief from that particular trouble that they may be really bugging them. So, irrespective of how well informed we are in terms of what constitutes happiness or not, nonetheless, whatever we identify with happiness, joy, we all aspire for that. And whatever we, even how mistakenly or not, identify something as suffering, we all do not want it. We are same in that. And that sameness is going to stay forever, irrespective of what jersey you are wearing. Right? What hairstyle you may be sporting. Speaking of hairstyle, no. Speaking of hairstyle, I first thought when I came to the US, I would really stand out with my shaved head. No, here it is almost like a fashion. Many of the basketball players, many of the football players, wear that hairstyle, right? So I was first worried that I might stand out with the shave. So irrespective, but then, not here. Not here. Even this dress on Halloween day at work, at Emory, I sometimes joke, when it is Halloween, I say, finally the day has come. I have prepared for the whole year. I've prepared for the whole year. Finally it has come today. They were really happy. Big, good laugh. They would say, and then they would say, you're funny. So this is something we have to dwell on. Meditate. Take time out. And really first see if one has any kind of misgivings about this, whether someone who is very heartful, does he or she really want happiness or not? Even challenge oneself. And then see if one could come up. At least think of individuals that are really bothering you and kind of triggering these negativities. Kind of think of where this is coming from. Maybe for them that's a strategy to kind of seeming a strategy to kind of secure themselves, which is happiness. Secure themselves, to make them secure, to make them safe, whatnot. That may be a strategy. But it may be hurting themselves, whatnot. So if we could look at those things and then kind of dwell in this, and then make this part and parcel of our usual thinking, irrespective of how they are going to do, that's what it is rooted in. It could be completely, misinformed, completely mistaken, whatnot. Yet at the same time, be cautious warned of how they might react. Not just go naive, saying, "Oh, it's all going to be good," because that's all coming from the aspiration for happiness. No, 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 not like that. Okay, this should do now. And now you got the point, right? So first work on oneself, and these are the ways to do that. And then, in a much more thorough way, understanding not just things being impermanent. Very important. In Buddhism, we speak of the four seals. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. All contaminated things are dissatisfactory in nature. Dissatisfactory in nature. All phenomena are empty, or all phenomena lack inherent existence. Nirvana is peace. So these three develop this understanding that whatever is conditioned, whatever is brought about, produced through causes and conditions, are bound to change, not just over time, even momentarily change, and then bring about this apparent, change, dramatic change over time. In this regard, in Buddhism, we speak of the four the four ways of ending. Every meeting ends with mitape tashi. The four ways of ending of impermanent things. Pardon? Yeah, mitape tashi. I think mitape tashi. Yeah. Every meeting ends with separation. Every birth ends with death. Every collection ends in dissipation. Anything going up comes down. This is physics, right? And this is reality. If we fail to accept that, that's only going to bring us more suffering. Not that when we lose someone close to us, valuable to us, we should not grieve. But grieve, that's befitting. The grief not fueled by unrealistic projections, unrealistic readings. So these are important to dwell on a regular basis, and then kind of make them part of your kind of psyche, to kind of bring them forth every now and then, and so that one could kind of adjust things, shift the perspectives into a more balanced place to then kind of proceed forward like that. So once we have that, then we may begin to kind of have more reason, more resources to kind of care about others, and also be of some resource in terms of how to be of some help. On the whole, being compassionate towards others, it's very beneficial. But of course, one can begin by being selfishly compassionate. That's okay, but I may be wrong. But yesterday I mentioned about compassion fatigue. I think that if it is always attached to selfishness, that this is good for me, I'm doing good, not for who they are, but ultimately this is going to be good to me, that eventually it may be too much. Now this is not going any good to me. It's taking my sleep, and you begin to now grumble. Grumble. Then, what would you name it? Compassion fatigue? If not, what? Right? Because that's what you thought you were doing, compassionate. But if you attach selfishness to this, That doesn't even become compassion even. Oh, that's my reading. I may be totally wrong. The research may show something different, but I think that is the case. Of course, to begin with, one can say, oh, being compassionate, being open-minded, being helpful is good to you. But that should not be the only reason. Even bodhisattvas aspire to attain Buddhahood so that they could be fully awakened. But that is not the only reason. And even that being the reason is so that they could help others. But basically, it is solely for others. I have to be the best so that I could be of best help for others. Not because it's because I. So it really, sometimes it is a so simple thing. It is just a twist and then it makes big difference. And in our daily life, many of the troubles, problems, sufferings that we have is because of self-obsession. We're so self-obsessed that now we have kind of almost nothing but oneself. Then one has difficulty fitting in the society. That every now and then you are bumped. You hardly have any room to dodge. You have so inflated yourself that every space is too little. Yeah, that happens. Okay, that should be enough. So I was preparing. I was just, at least from my presentation point of view, not that you need to be prepared, but from my presentation point of view, I was just making the case from the determination to the preparation in between of how oneself has to kind of grow in that resourcefulness for oneself. And then from that place, now one has, what do you call it, a viable platform to then make the moves to relate to others and also be hopeful in helping. So yesterday we used this reasoning to look at our own situation, to then put to locate the source of this in our afflictions and its ramifications, and then having seen that to be our condition, we then reaffirm the need for determination to get off the hook. Now, and then from that we have now generated the strength to really kind of be effective in doing that for oneself through all these different means, of which the most thorough, at least from a Buddhist perspective, most thorough in the sense of uprooting them, because the different ways of dealing with the sly, fox, jackal, hyena were temporary, though not too temporary, but they're kind of progressively stronger and stronger. None of them kind of can really uproot the negativities. At least from a Buddhist perspective, it is the insight into the interdependent nature of things in its very subtle form, which in which case it is just the other side of emptiness. When we understand that and then integrate that to the point of really kind of be able to respond to situation naturally from that kind of awakening, and then the actual process of chipping off at the root begins, to the point of actually completely rooting it out. So in any way, whatever level of capacity one has developed in kind of not only seeing where the root lies, but also in how to deal with them. So from that level, one could be encouraged and inspired to help others. But by first seeing others being in the same situation. So that's the same situation that we talked about yesterday, and this is not something that you find only one's dear ones and near ones in, but that's something everyone, right? Every sentient being. So, and on top of that, yeah, we'll talk about how to then move on to expand our mind. Okay, so next one, please. Yeah, so contemplating the kindness of others. See, in the scriptures and also in reality, also that seems to be the case. When we see ourselves in the same situation, seeing ourselves being same, the sameness is itself very important to kind of connect us with others. So that's one area to work on. Another area to work on, so that we could generate and strengthen our strength of love and compassion, would be to see how we are interconnected. How not only we are same in that level, on that level, but how we cannot but depend on each other. So be that in the case of close beings, neutrals, enemies. We've already spoken about the enemies. That's the hard thing, right? But we have now begun to see, oh, these are rare, precious, right? So, and that they are doing this for free at their own cost. At their own cost is very important to recognize. And they are volunteering to be our lab. They are volunteering to be our lab partners or even guinea pigs. Wow. And they are doing this without having to be asked. For what is the expression? Yeah, without having to be asked. For free, yeah. Yes. And then from a Buddhist perspective, all they get from that is nothing but loss. The seeming temporary goods, temporary benefits, they contribute to even bigger suffering. Not only they suffer then and there by indulging in the negativities, I don't think anyone feels so good when they are caught in rage. No, their body balance is also put off. Even their body balance goes cattywampus. Even their body balances go out of kilter. That's what I have learned recently from someone. I promised that I would use it here. Now I did it. And then in terms of the mental stability, mental peace, how that would affect their own relationships in the close corners, they only suffer. And then what they get in return, if they succeed in getting something done or not, it's like a fleeting thing, very fleeting thing. It's like a toy that they get back. But in return for that, they suffer a lot. And then from a karma point of view, even more suffering is to come. Whereas, if we can maintain our presence of mind in the face of those, the process they will be initiating for ourselves could really go so far in really pointing to our own potentials within. The jewel of potential within could be so unmistakably pointed at, and from there we could grow, say from a Buddhist perspective, to the level of being fully awakened for oneself and for others. And that kind of awakening, that kind of pointing that they do is very practical, unlike theorizing. Very practical. It's like a hands-on experiment instruction they're giving. Okay, so now we have dealt with the enemies, now neutrals and close beings. What do we need to talk about, right? Say in the case of close beings, all they cherish, they kind of go to extreme length and really caring for us and suffering and then bothering, going to so many problems or not, just for our sake, right? Caring. And then the neutrals, at least they do not harbor harm towards us. But in the meantime, without our knowing, they will be the ones kind of really creating the facilities for us. Yeah, it's just a matter of really pondering and reflecting how we are connected that it will become so apparent and overwhelmingly so. Just think of how our parents spent time for us. Even if not, say, in this fast-paced life, not personally, physically, but in terms of their mental investment. And then without our knowing, many of the things that we rely on for our whole life, for our own life, survival, many of the facilities that they come from sources that we don't even know. I particularly think of the vaccinations, medical, wow. One day, was it last year, there was a Chinese woman who worked her years in kind of finding out some kind of vaccination, right? And didn't she get Nobel Prize? Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, someone, Abbey, and her work is having impact on millions and millions. Many of them would not even know that such person existed, let alone. And so goes with so many of the things, Yeah, so contemplating, it's just a matter of contemplating on that we begin to feel endeared by them. So seeing the similarity and then an endearing attitude. Those are the two components that can now serve as the platform to then develop a sense of love and compassion, genuine love and compassion. So aspiring to free others, I mean, I have touched on that, but I wanted to kind of give you some idea of how in the Buddhist scriptures we go about cultivating universal love and compassion to eventually result in a strong sense of bodhicitta. So affinity, seeing the sameness too at a very, very fundamental level. And then empathy, we will begin to kind of empathize with them in terms of what they are going through on the basis of our sameness. And then on top of that, I mean, in between it should come the endearing love, where we dwell. In between empathy and compassion comes the endearing love, where we begin to see others in the light of being endearing to us, mainly on the ground of the kindness. When I say kindness, others are kind, I'm even including enemies. They are kind, not necessarily by having a kind-hearted mind towards us. Otherwise, they wouldn't be enemies to us. The very reason why they are precious and rare is because they harbor the signature element of being an enemy, which is intention of harm. So it's not talking of kindness in the sense of harboring kind heart towards us, but in the sense of how much we benefit from them. And in the case of enemies, at their cost. So dwelling on that. And likewise, we can extend it to other animals also, environment, animals, ecosystem, whatnot, if we want to. Like our whole being, from a single cell to this, billion cell organism. How there has been give and take to the extent of almost being one with the environment, right? In the scriptures, we even, in the scriptures, in Tibetan usual food, grace, food offering, food offering prayers, there is even one stanza that I really like. Luji simbu tata sangsinji, The worms, I'm using the term worm, but it could be anything. Simbu means very tiny insects. Luji simbu. Tata sangsinji. At this point, I am feeding the worms in my body with the food that I'm eating. And but eventually, I also wish to be able to feed them with Dharma. So we are not just multicellular, multi-organism. Not just a singular, homogeneous, singular organism. No, we are made up of so many organisms, which are very, very, very crucial. Okay, so it's just a matter of thinking, and we begin to really connect and see the connection and feel and be filled with a warm feeling, appreciation, awareness of the connection, and then see what wonder it does in really kind of meaning to be appreciative and caring, whatnot. That at the same time kind of infuse that with a wisdom to kind of be realistic in dealing with the situation, not just be naively driven by them, but rather. So that's the reason why we always talk about the need of combining wisdom and compassion together. So once we have love or compassion, the endearing love is a love that sees others endearing by reason of the benefit that we exchange for each other. And then the loving kindness comes at the same level as compassion, depending on what aspect you are looking at the situation. If it is suffering that you are bothered by, then you wish them to be free from the suffering. That's compassion. If it is joy or the lack of joy, but your attention is driven towards joy, either lack of it or having it, and you wish for them to regain the joy or continue to be joyful, then that's loving kindness. So in the initial, it will be at the attitude level, and then eventually when it grows, then it can be expressed out in actions. And there are two different levels of actions according to how much one is capable of. So the special resolve being talked about here is the resolve that now not only I dwell in the compassion and the wish to be of help, but I will take the resolve in taking on the responsibility, in shouldering the responsibility that I will do it. Although one may not have any clear idea of how to do it, but you take the resolve that whatever it takes, I'll take this responsibility. I'll do my best. Not only wishing. So you move from wishful thinking to actual resolve to do it. And then eventually, from a Buddhist perspective, the most thorough, effective way of really helping sentient beings, that too in the truest sense of the word, of kind of relieving them from the root of the suffering, not just being content with temporary relief here and there. Of course, they are also wonderful, appreciated. But it could go deeper into relieving them from the root of their suffering, would be by becoming fully awakened oneself. So that's what the bodhicitta is. Bodhi is the awakened state, citta is the mind aspiring for it. So that you develop this in the course of wondering what would be that I should do, that would be the most beneficial thing. Then one would land on the achievement of full awakening. And that aspiration is called bodhicitta. Bodhi is the full awakened state, and citta is the mind aspiring for it. But at here, again, although you have resolved to do whatever it takes, and you have found that achieving Buddhahood is the way to do that. By the way, it is very important to remember, when you generate bodhicitta or when you aspire to attain full awakening, that is not at the expense of all other ways of helping them, no matter how trivial, temporary they may be. It's included in here. Yes. There can be a bodhicitta like, oh, I only work for that. No, I don't help. No, that's not bodhicitta intact. Not at all. Okay, let's move to the next one. Yeah, so in terms of how to go about, now that you have landed on the idea that yes, ultimately, fully awakened, becoming fully awakened. Fully awakened. When I say fully awakened, I'm using the term awakened, which may have a cognitive connotation, or maybe not. But what it is supposed to mean is awakening in the sense of awakening the positive potential, whatever you have, be that the potential for love, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, tolerance, of course, wisdom, etc. All of those potentials would have now become fully, consummately blossomed, with nothing remaining anymore in potentials. That is full awakening. So what happens is, one may wonder, what about anger, jealousy? Are they also fully awakened? No, when these positive qualities fully awaken, they do not leave any room for any of the negativities, not even the slightest chance. So we cannot speak of angry Buddha, jealous Buddha. So, by the way, the awakening has to be understood in that respect. Fully awakened, awakening. The reason for that is positive qualities have a natural strength. Negativities, no matter how strong they may be, how high it may be rising, how it is landed, it is rooted on a marsh. The skyscrapers of negativities, no matter how majestic they may look like, how strong they may look like, they have a very unstable base. Unstable base in the sense that it is rooted in misperception. And misperception, no matter how strong it may be, it always leaves room for correction. Whereas positivities, at least at our level, may depend on these misperceptions here and there, but do not necessarily have to. They could be grounded in unmistaken perception. That leaves for them to have a very strong, stable grounding. And that's the possibility of how they can be fully awakened. So they have this special strength, backup. On top of that, the nature of mind is such. The nature of mind is such. If we were to be, the nature of mind is such that every moment you train, it becomes more and more and more attuned to it, to the point that eventually it will be effortless. Unlike athletes, unlike runners, athletes, we have seen Usain Bolt, right? Usain Bolt, the Jamaican runner, Usain Bolt, yeah. Yeah, every time he runs, he really has to kind of prepare and then really run. He has to really build his strength every now and then. In the case of the mind, of course, for some time it requires that repeated training again and again and again, and eventually it will pick up. So much so that it will be just, you could jump right from here. It's not like running from there and then jump from there. Rather, you could jump right from here and there. Plus, the positivities do not necessarily depend on, do not happen, and do not necessarily have to happen on unstable basis. So based on that, we speak of the possibility of rooting out the negativities, rooted as they are in these perceptions, no matter how difficult and strong it may be rooted because of habituation. And on the other hand, we say how positivities could be developed infinitely and to a level where then it would be just natural. So from a, what do you call it, technical, or what do you say, classical Buddhist perspective, generating bodhicitta, which is the altruistic aspiration for benefiting others, but with a difference in that it is wise enough to land onto the ultimate means by which that could be realized in seeing full awakening as the way of doing that. In terms of how to go about developing that, in the scriptures we first speak of the aspirational bodhicitta, where you aspire without making any commitment. You aspire to attain full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. And then one summons up the courage to eventually kind of, what do you call, stabilize it, to then engage in actual practice that would now start the momentum in realizing that. And that kind of a commitment to now, it will be interesting. In the scriptures, it makes this point clear between the aspirational bodhicitta and what would be at the committing to the practice of bodhisattva, tantric taking vows, that would be the engaged bodhicitta. So the two is likened in this way. The aspirational bodhicitta is kind of the intention to move without actually moving, whereas the engaged bodhicitta is now, after the intention, now one has started to lift one's legs and move. So that's what follows, and there one then takes the bodhisattva vow, the commitment. Of course, one could be engaging those practices beforehand also, but not bound with a commitment. But now here you take a commitment in the presence of a master, a bodhisattva master, and then you commit yourself to engaging in those practices, which would be mainly the 6 perfections, or the six far-reaching practices, of which the 6th one, the far-reaching practice of wisdom, is very crucial, because with that it would impact all the rest, and the quality would be very different. Without that, it would be another degree, a lesser degree of quality. So much so that we even have a name in identifying those practices. Say if it is a perfection of generosity practice, if it is conjoined with the wisdom of understanding not just impermanence, of course those are preceding, but even with the wisdom of understanding the lack of inherent existence, the wisdom of understanding the empty nature of things, empty nature which only affirms the dependent origination nature of things. So any of the 5 practices, like generosity, concentration, patience, joyous effort, morality, if not conjoined with the wisdom of understanding emptiness, although it may be conjoined with the wisdom of understanding impermanence, the dissatisfactory nature of things, other ways of causation, etc., but not lack of inherent existence, then those practices are even called, for lack of a better term of translating it, because literally it means worldly practice of generosity, but not worldly in our usual context. Worldly in the context of non-Arya practice. And then those conjoined with the understanding of emptiness, conjoined in the sense that the very process of engaging in an action would be very much informed with the fact of things being merely dependently, relatedly existing with no intrinsic objectified identity of its own, be that the action of giving, the nature of the giver, the person to be given, all of those. We call that the three spheres of an action. All seeing all three spheres of an action in the light of being merely, I'm insisting, merely dependently related with no intrinsic identity at all. When you engage in practices, any practices in that light, bringing the sixth paramita to kind of permeate the whole fabric of that practice, then that practice becomes uplifted to the level of what we call super mundane, which is the Arya level of practice. And so the strength of the merit accumulated from that, the strength of the practice that goes in really attacking the, combating the root grasping would be much more stronger. Okay, let's move. Okay, so in terms of actually, so that was training in the determination, the process. Now, in terms of the actual steps of going through that, are these following. Yes, could be. Yes. Great compassion, great resolve. When I begin with great compassion, that means all the other preceding practices have already been covered before that, which would mean seeing the similarity, cherishing love, kindness of others, sense of repaying their kindness, all of those. And then great resolve to take on the responsibility upon oneself. And then in the midst of wondering what would that responsibility be, to then as to work for Buddhahood. And there too, it has to be what you call conjoined with the actual practice, which would be even much more stronger if bound by a vow or a commitment. So one takes bodhisattva vow. And the actual action that entails it would be practicing in a what do you call nutshell, the six paramitas, the six perfections, of which the special emphasis on wisdom. And then once, see, this is one way of doing it. When one has understood emptiness in its fullness, though still conceptually, intellectually, or even stronger than that, in a kind of really having now begun to feel, having now begun to feel completely in, what do you call, completely in, completely comfortable, completely in sync with it, with kind of with no misgivings of one sort or the other. So then one could move on to what do you call, almost like land that on a shamatha kind of a basis, concentration basis. Of course, by then one would have developed certain levels of concentration, maybe third, fourth level of shamatha already achieved through these, but kind of fine-tuning it even further to the actual shamatha level, and then kind of moving forward to the vipassana level. Then the union of the two in the sense that now one has the perfect base for that kind of a wisdom and other practices to be placed on, which is the union of the shamatha concentration and the vipassana insight. And then move forward from there. Then, do we have a next one? Oh yes. Then the path of seeing onward. When you say path of seeing, here path of seeing the ultimate reality, but seeing it directly. So this is called the path of seeing, which is the third path on a bodhisattva level. The path of seeing the when you achieve shamatha and vipassana, the union of the two, that is entering the path of preparation. And then the next is path of seeing. In the case of the Heart Sutra mantra, Tadyatha means this is the way for bodhisattvas to proceed on the journey to Buddhahood. What are the way? Gate, gate, paragate. Paragate is the path of seeing. Gate, second gate is the path of preparation, which would be the union of the wisdom and shamatha and vipassana. And the others before that are the path of accumulation. So path of seeing marks a milestone in the journey, in that there now the understanding has further developed with those bases of shamatha and vipassana into a direct perception. Direct perception. Now it is no more, or at least from their point of view, a new phase of awakening has attained with regard to the understanding of the emptiness, in that now a perceptual awakening, perceptual understanding, not just conceptual, but perceptual understanding has dawned there. So from that, because it has now become perceptual, fully integrated, I mean, of course, to some degree of integration can even happen with an conceptual understanding, but it is further developed to a perceptual understanding that now it has become completely one with one's personality, so that one now kind of automatically, naturally, almost with great strength relates to the world from that place. So now the strength has developed so much that now the actual chipping off of the root of affliction starts. Which means, actual chipping off means whatever layer is chipped off, that, that share of suffering would have been completely rendered irreversible. That share of suffering would have been completely eliminated. So that's the time when the first taste of actual Dharma refuge happens. Which is to say that the path of seeing is the realization component of Dharma refuge, and the corresponding, corresponding factor of cessation of whatever level of negativities, whatever level of gross grasping has been eliminated. That factor of cessation would be the first taste of cessation, the first cessation component of the Dharma refuge. And the person from that point onward is called Sangha refuge. So Sangha refuge are Arya beings. So now you have seen how with their own experience, actual experience in the form of realization and cessation, they are capable of serving as a reliable company, reliable guide on our journey from their experience, from the basis of their experiences. When the person progresses further and eventually becomes Buddha, he becomes the Buddha refuge. So the Dharma, the Sangha refuge and Buddha refuge become the refuge because they possess Dharma refuge in them. That's how we say Dharma refuge is the actual refuge.